What is a woman? That would be legislation defining what a woman is. Religious release time, children being able to go outside of the school and learn about Jesus during school hours. And age of consent, children needing their parents to participate in their medical decisions. These are common sense bills with common sense legislation, but they experience tremendous resistance. Today, we're bringing on a state legislator who's experienced some of that resistance, but is fighting back against it. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we're in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. This week is one more segment or chapter or whatever volume in bringing on people who are doing good work in Montgomery. I'm highly critical of our state government. The reason I started 1819 News is because I knew we needed change in our government. But despite all of the critiques that I offer Montgomery, that doesn't mean there's not people down there doing a great job. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job of bringing people on for you to get to know, to hear about the good things that they are doing so that you can get behind them, you can learn about them, you can support them, you can cheer them on, you can pray for them, all of those things. And so we've had a number of different people from the Senate, from the House, coming on to kind of share their story and some of the things that they're working on and their perspective on what's going on in Montgomery. And this week we're doing the same thing with Representative Susan DuBose. She is in District 45 in kind of the North Shelby County, and she'll get into exactly where her district is. Gotten to know her. She ran the North Shelby Republican women of North Shelby County. That's what it is, which was one of the first places I got to speak. And they're just a wonderful group of women that she led that and then got into the legislature. So Representative Susan DuBose, thank you so much for your time.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Bryan.
Yep. So before we jump in, I got to do my spiel.
Yes, do your spiel.
I got to do the sales spiel.
Yes, it's important.
Okay, it's very important, guys, of the utmost importance. If you're not supporting us financially, we need you to do that. We are citizen-supported news. We don't take money from, got an email from another news source this morning. At the very top, it said, brought to you by the Alabama Department of Mental Health. That's called state-sponsored news. That's state-sponsored media. We've shown that Alabama Political Reporter is being funded by Alabama Department of Transportation, AL.com being funded by the Alabama Department of Public Health, and on it goes. We're the only news outlet in the state that doesn't take money from these agencies, so we need your help to keep the lights on and continue to shine a light on what's going on in our state. So you can do that by going to 1819news.com. Go there. At the top of the page, there's a button that says Become a Member. Click that. Membership starts as little as $5 a month. With that, you get access to behind-the-scenes content when we record that. You get cool merch. But more than anything, you get to be the citizen in citizen-supported news. So please go do that now. And without further ado, I bring to you the interview. So, yeah, the first time I met you was you invited me to come speak at the Republican Women of North Shelby County. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
yeah,
got it. There's a lot of words there, and I got to go speak, and it was before anyone knew who I was, and Katie Britt was speaking that day.
Yes.
And you allowed me to go and speak, and it was kind of comical because I thought I was going to speak after Katie. And so I'm just, I got there a little bit late, and I'm stuffing my mouth with food. And you're like, and Bryan Dawson's going to come tell us about 1819 News. I was like, what?
I don't remember that. You did a great job.
My mouth was full.
You were natural.
But it was great. And that was one of the first times. And then shortly after that, you guys had me come back and speak, and I got to take the whole time. And so I think you guys have had Jeff out there. You have definitely one of the strongest, if not the best, Republican women group of all of them. So really appreciate you guys and doing that. And then from there have now jumped into the legislature. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I tell you what, that group is going strong. I think we've got even better leadership than when I was there. But that's how I learned about politics, is being involved in Republican women. I always had an interest in politics my whole life. I've always been a Republican. I've always been very conservative. My parents were conservative Republicans, so I just come by it naturally. But I just have an interest in it. So I just always followed politics. And when my kids got older, went off to college, I was able to put more time into it. And that's when I went on to be a leader in the Republican Women Organization throughout the state and even nationally.
Yeah. Are you from Alabama?
I grew up in Mississippi on the Gulf Coast in Ocean Springs. I grew up on the bayou and the beach right there. So lived there till, honestly, I was 18 and then went to school at the University of South Alabama. Never ended up going, back to live in Ocean Springs after that. And I met my husband there in Mobile. And we moved up to Birmingham, actually North Shelby County, 1 month after we were married. I was in banking, and I moved up here with my job in banking. He was a young, new CPA, and he just figured he could get a job here.
Yeah.
And he did. So we've made our home in North Shelby County for the last 36 years. Wow. We love it.
That's awesome. No, it's a beautiful place, and North Shelby County, especially one of the most conservative places in the state as well.
It's easy for me to be me in North Shelby County.
Yeah.
And even in Leeds, I go on, I actually have from Chelsea all the way to Irondale. Mm-hmm. So I have the whole city of Leeds, which is in Jefferson County for the most part, but also Shelby and St. Clair County. And then I go all the way up Grants Mill Road to Old Leeds Road and into Irondale. And I have loved serving. I have a small portion of Irondale. I've loved serving that area as well. But just great people throughout my district. They keep me accountable, and I love that. They're active. They're engaged. They call me. I answer my phone. Yeah. We don't have staff. People don't realize that. And when I answer my phone, people get a little bit flustered because they don't expect me to answer. But, Brian, we don't have people that help us. We don't have a staff. So I have all my calls from the State House forwarded to my cell phone. And, I pick up and I answer. And I try to get to work helping.
That's awesome. I think it takes a lot of different types to make things work and get things done in Montgomery. I think there's big issues that are big ticket items that conservatives look to, whether it's gambling, marijuana, the gas tax, kind of as you look over the last 10 years, how have people voted and these type of things. But overall, how has it been? So this was your third session, correct?
Yes.
So this is your third session. How have you been able to maintain your conservative stances, views, while still being effective after 3 years? Because there's some people, I'm not going to name any names, that came in that were, I thought, going to be really conservative when they came in with you and that have not been. How have you been able to kind of keep your true north and while also getting things done and not compromising?
Right. Well, I think the main thing is to know where you stand on the issues.
Yeah.
So, when gambling came up, that was a very easy issue for me.
Yeah.
The first day I met Speaker Ledbetter, I explained to him that I was going to be the team player to the extent that I could, but I knew right up front there was an issue that we weren't going to agree on because I was not going to be able to vote for gambling. Yeah. And I felt like that's what my constituents stood for. And I wasn't going to be able to compromise on that. And so, when you kind of know where you stand up front and you're firm about it, Ledbetter I never had any problems with that. Nobody ever really tried to twist my arm. I think they felt like I was hopeless. And so they just didn't even try. They knew where I was. And so sometimes that works, And I think, I've been around for a while. I'm not as young as some of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm there because I love it and because I want to be. But I also had a great life before I was in the legislature. I was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of years. That's what I did mostly. That's the thing that I'm the most proud of.
Amen.
And that will never go away. And, if the voters vote me out, I'll just go back home and I'll be a mom and a housewife again and love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So you've had some headlines with some of the legislation that you've been working on since you got in there. I think probably the biggest one that you're most known for that's kind of synonymous with Susan DuBose is the What is a Woman Act or What is a Woman Bill. Talk about that legislation. I mean, obviously it's very common sense. We live in a world where common sense isn't common, and so we have to do these type of things. But I want to hear specifically, tell us about the legislation. Tell us about some of the resistance that you had to it, and then what it took to finally get it over the line.
Okay. Well, I will have to tell you, I never saw myself carrying that type of legislation. When I ran for office, my background is finance and analytics, and I thought I was going to be studying budgets and doing stuff like that and working on tax reform. And as it turned out, I was needed to do something else. And this bill really, let me just change my words there. The way I found out about this bill was actually from Catherine Robertson in the Attorney General's office.
Yeah.
We were going through some training at Forestry, and she's a true conservative. I absolutely love her. But she started talking about, we need to define some of these terms. I can see some problems down the road. So she just put that little bug in my ear, and I started studying the issue and started working with Independent Women's Forum, that's the group that Riley Gaines, the swimmer, is the ambassador for.
Okay.
So I studied that issue. We worked on some legislation year one, didn't really get anywhere with it. And as it evolved, we were able to better define the terms. But basically what is a woman does is define male and female, man, woman, boy, girl, by the biological definition. And it took a little while to explain to people why we needed this, especially some of the men. They didn't really get it. And that's why we need female legislators. That's why we need a variety, a diversity of legislators. But the fact of the matter is that women were losing their rights because people were identifying as women that weren't really women. We were losing women's scholarships. Women were having to compete with men that identified as women in women's sports. And anytime somebody that's not a woman identifies themselves as a woman, that takes away a right of a real woman.
Correct.
So it needed to be done. And we refined the definitions. This past summer, I actually went on a statewide speaking tour doing town halls throughout the state. Often Moms for Liberty were sponsoring it. Y'all sponsored some of it. Allison Sinclair sponsored. She was there. And it was basically just educating the communities on this issue. Attorney General Marshall was there. It all started getting into the Title IX issue. Yeah. When Biden tried to change the definition of sex in the Title IX issue to where you gender identify as whatever sex you wanted to be, that was infringing on women's spaces and women's rights. So we spent the whole summer, really, I probably went to 8 or so different town halls talking about it. And then, Governor Ivey took it up as one of her agenda items. Yeah. So when she did the State of the State speech, she talked about what is a woman.
Amen.
And I'll tell you what, that was what we needed just to launch it. And it was the very first bill that she signed into law this year.
That's awesome. And people, we take a lot of flack because we're very critical of a lot of things that the governor does. But what people don't understand is not because we dislike her or that we hate her. Nothing makes me happier than saying, thank you, Governor. Wonderful job. Like, that's what I would prefer to do that all session, right? And so that was definitely one of those things where we're very grateful that she made that a priority. We looked like Alabama this year, right? We looked like we should did. In that realm. And when you started talking about the bill, I just started chuckling because it's just like, and I talk about this with Attorney General Steve Marshall all the time too. I'm like, is it not insane that, like, of all the things that an attorney general should be doing and all the things that 1819 could be reporting on, that so much of our time is dedicated to keeping people from chopping kids' genitals off, keeping men from going into women's locker rooms. Like, it's bizarre where we've gotten as a society. However, the reason it's gotten there is because people, 20 years ago, something that was being infringed upon that was common sense, everyone's like, well, we're just going to stay quiet. We're just going to stay quiet. Well, that continues to get worse and worse and worse to where we are now, and now we have to draw the line. And so I'm grateful that you drew a line in the sand and said this far and no further, and went and did the work over the last few years to gather support and put this thing across the finish line.
Yes. And I want to thank the Alabama legislators for supporting it, both Republicans and Democrats. I mean, we knew the polling. We knew where it stood. Close to 90% of Alabamians on both sides of the aisle believed in this issue. Yeah.
It's insane. So another one that's been in the headlines, you've got this gift, Susan. You just find all your stuff finds its way into the headlines. That's probably a good thing because that means it needs to be taken care of, is this idea of religious release time. And so the way I talked to some people, some individuals and businessmen who are really wanting to do this year before the session, and then you ended up picking it up, that this idea that essentially for an hour or whatever it is, once a week, children can leave the actual campus and go and get religious learning somewhere else and then come back Very common sense, very, well, of course that's okay. Like, why wouldn't that be okay? We let them do all kinds of other things. Why wouldn't this be okay? And it got hammered down in the House and it got hammered down in the Senate. Talk about the bill and kind of how you saw it going through and what you think the reasons for it dying were.
Yeah. Well, let me give everybody just a little bit of background on that first of all. So religious release was proved constitutional by the Supreme Court in 1952. So this concept has been around for decades. And in some parts of the country, it's very popular. And there are thousands of students that have been participating in religious release for decades. And all that is it allows students to go to an off-campus religious class. No state funds are used. Parents have to give permission. Transportation has to be provided. The faith-based entity provides liability. And the parents and the faith-based entity and the school all work together to come up with a time that works best for the school and for the student. It has to be during an elective class. We don't want kids missing core classes, of course. So it's just, look, it's enriching the public school day. And it's parental choice. It's religious liberty. To me, it's like basic and obvious.
Yeah.
I first learned about this concept over the summer. I was at a couple of different conferences that came up. One of them that I go to is called National Association of Christian Legislators.
Okay.
And they were talking about it there, how it's growing significant across the country. And then I went to another family conference, and it came up there. And somebody started talking to me about it, about carrying it in Alabama at that point. And I said, we really need to know if there's a parent interest. We need to know parents want to participate in it first. So that's, kind of how this worked life-wise is a curriculum that's used throughout the nation. And they came into the state and just did some polling. Yeah. And we found out, yes, parents are very interested in this. We had, almost 5,000 signatures of parents that wanted to participate. So, I just worked on that legislation, and I just thought, well, this is just easy. In fact, I kind of just decided to do it partway through the session in the midst of everything else I was doing because I thought, oh, no problem.
No brainer.
Yeah. This will fly right through Education Committee, and I can keep on doing that and all my other stuff. Well, it ended up being much more difficult than I thought, and the reason that is surprisingly, it was our school board associations and our superintendent associations that came out against this. And it was so surprising because no taxpayer dollars, minimal amount of any effort of anybody in the school system whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if a parent gives permission, who's it harming? So I was shocked. They came against one bill this session. Dozens of educational bills that came before our legislature, they fought against one, and that was this particular bill on religious liberty.
Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth has been in the news on this, calling out those public sector unions, if you will, is another way of saying that, these associations. You said it was the School Board Association and the Superintendent Association. Where was the Alabama Education Association on this?
They were fine.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. Huh. They, I talked to them about it, and I actually told them, thank you. Thank you for not going against this bill. Yeah. And they said, we don't really get involved in cultural issues.
Yeah.
This didn't affect the classroom. Yeah. We're fine. Doesn't affect the teachers. We're fine.
Superintendents and school boards.
And,
what in the world?
What people don't even realize, and I learned so much through this whole process, is that these organizations that represent superintendents and they represent individual school boards all across the state, those boards are all members and they pay money. They use tax dollars to pay membership in this organization that gives them training and is supposed to provide them guidance. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of those individual members liked the bill.
Yeah.
They were upset that their advocates were fighting so hard against it because they believed in it.
Sure.
So I had members of my own school board saying, hey, we like this. We don't know why they're fighting it. These people are crazy. We don't even pay attention to them. But then there were other members that took their criticism seriously, and that's when it gets to be problematic.
Yeah.
Look, this is my take. Let's just all communicate honestly, respectively, and together.
Sure.
So some of these people that spoke in my in the committee never even came to me to talk about it. You know, they'd say something about this survey. Well, there's this survey of 4,500 parents that want religious liberty. Is this survey even real? Does this survey even exist?
Yeah.
Yes, it's real. Yes, it exists. If you would have asked me about it, I would have told you, and I could have told you exactly how many parents in your school district signed up for it.
Yeah.
So in Shelby County, which is my district, there's 320 parents that signed up on this particular survey that said they want to do it. We didn't even poll all parents. That's just a random selection of parents that happen to even know about this particular curriculum.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Bryan.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. I think it digs to a deeper question, and you may not want to comment on this, that's fine, but I think worth noting is the concept of a public sector union, okay, or public sector, they call them associations now, union, whatever. It is, as you said, superintendents, school boards, and this does pull in the AEA, organizations that are funded by tax dollars, and they fund organizations. So tax dollars are being pulled from citizens to go and fund lobbying organizations that go and lobby for interests that aren't necessarily theirs. And I think that on its face is something that we've heard a ton about since starting 1819 News. When I go all over the state and I sit down and do lunches with big groups and talk and speak and do all this. It's basically what I spend the majority of my time doing. And I ask people and go around the room and say, what's the one thing as you think about the future of the state of Alabama, your children and grandchildren, what's the one thing culturally or politically that, you know, makes you want to pull your hair out? What's the thing that, you know, drives you craziest? One thing I've never heard them say, I just want gambling. That's never happened, but just throwing that out there. Never happened. But one of the things that does come up often is public sector unions. It drives them crazy. The fact that there is tax dollars going to these lobbying organizations to lobby you and the rest of the government for things that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
And so it's. I mean, if you want to have a union, you want to have an association, that's fine, but don't use tax dollars for it.
Well, and I will say these that we're talking about here, the School Board Association and the Superintendents Association, look, they are funded directly by taxpayer dollars, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So at least with the AEA, those teachers use their own money to voluntarily join the AEA. Sure. They don't have to join.
Yeah.
They choose to or choose not to, right?
Yeah.
But these other groups, this is taxpayer dollars, as far as I can tell, because the school boards themselves pay the membership dues. And the only money that school boards get is from taxpayer funding. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's really an interesting problem. I don't necessarily have the exact solution to it. I wouldn't be so disturbed if they were just providing an educational element. If they just said to their members, look, here's all the facts. There's 100 bills flowing through, and obviously you as a school board member, you don't have time to read everything. So let me send you the pros and cons summarized on all these issues so that you can make your own decision.
Sure.
But they don't really do that. What they do is they decide what school board members should think, and they have, you know, they call on them. Like they send these SOS texts out and say, stop this bill now. You know, and it's almost like it kind of scares the school board members and the superintendents into following what they're doing because they think there's some big emergency going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think religious release is a big emergency.
No.
And it was just misconstrued to be something so dangerous that it scared board members and it scared superintendents.
I would love to see those text messages, you know, the text alerts that go out like, stop what you're doing now. Kids might learn about Jesus. We have to stop, put a stop to this.
Right. And some of the information that went out was actually non-factual. Let's just say it. It was a lie.
What?
There were lies that went out. And I only knew about it because I had written the bill and I knew exactly what the bill said. So when, information went out that said you have to do X amount of hours of a week, no, school boards completely decide their own policy. That you're going to, there were so many just inaccurate facts that went out that scared the local school boards.
Yeah.
And that's what's disappointing. That's what's really disappointing to me, because why can't we work together on the facts and let's come up with something that we can all live with?
Yeah.
If you want us to write the policy and you want us to define what a core curriculum is, we can define it. If you want me to define religion because you don't know what that is, we can define it. But we were given local school boards the opportunity with some leeway to just, have the policy that they want in place that will work. We currently have a policy in the state of Alabama that allows for this to take place. It says school boards may have a policy. But the problem is, what we were finding out is may also means may not.
Yeah.
And oftentimes a parent would go into a school and say, hey, I've heard about this religious release program. Do you have it? And a principal, would rightly tell them, no, we don't. And so it would just end there.
Yeah.
So we want school boards to implement a policy like so many other states in the whole nation that have also, you shall have a policy. There's 14 other states that are implementing policies because they're required by law to do so. There has, the school hasn't burned down. The kids haven't come back and done anything crazy. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
So, it's scare tactics, it's fear-mongering, and that's what people that are against religious freedom have been doing for centuries. And I hate to see that happening in Alabama. I don't think our school boards really stand for that at all.
Yeah, and there's something about bureaucracy that attracts liberals, and what I mean by that is, like, Alabama is, I say it all the time, we are the most conservative state in the nation. I put us up against Texas. I think we're more conservative than Texas. As far as the people are concerned, so as far as the citizens are concerned, or the people that are at the ground floor. Like, so you even talk about the teachers union. I've not been the AEA's biggest fan, but at the end of the day, the teachers are mostly conservative, right? Like we have a very conservative population.
And they will tell you that. Yeah.
But if you go into the bowels of power in Montgomery and whether it's in the education or in the public health or the mental health or all radical liberal people who do not reflect the values of the state whatsoever. There's something about, I don't know if it's the power, if it's the bureaucratic nature of, like, conservatives are more free market entrepreneurial business people that want to go out and build something, and maybe liberals are more like bean counting. I don't know what the predisposition is, but it seems that liberals are more predisposed to go work in state government and find themselves entrenched at the Alabama Department of Public Health running it named Scott Harris, or whatever. I don't know what that is, but it's so bizarre to me that Montgomery, in those places, those bureaucratic places, are so filled with liberals, despite our state being so conservative. Yeah,
I say all the time, I wish our AEA, Alabama Educators Association, would disaffiliate with the NEA.
Yeah,
I would feel so much better about working with them, because I look, one-on-one with those people, I'm fine. It's just their association. We pay money to the NEA, and they are crazy. They are cuckoo. Everybody knows that, and they will tell you. Our state people will tell you, yes, they're cuckoo.
Yeah,
they're cuckoo. And we have so many good people in our school boards and in our superintendents. These are Look, the school board members are volunteers. They're parents. They're business people that want to do the best thing that they can for the city, for their schools, for their students, for their kids, for their grandkids. And they deserve to have some good representation that gives them the facts, that's not skewing decision-making for them and not fear-mongering. And that's what I want to see done.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's another piece of legislation that I think is very important that you worked on this year, the age of consent.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes, I think this might be one of the most significant pieces of legislation that we passed this year. I wish it were better than it is. But most people don't even realize, and your listeners may not realize, but the age of medical consent in the state of Alabama has been 14 since 1972. It's the lowest in the nation. There's only 3 states that are lower than 18, and we're one of them at the age of 14, which means that a child can make that 14-year-old child can make all his own medical decisions. Parents can kept from having access to medical records. And I have heard horror stories from parents whose children are getting treatment or they're getting diagnosed, and doctors, if a child says, I don't want my mom to know, I don't want my mom in the room, I don't want my parents to know this, doctors can legally have to withhold information from parents, and they do. I have heard just a sad story from a dad whose 14-year-old child is in a mental health unit, and he has probably what's going to be lifelong mental health problems, and he was diagnosed at age 12 with lifelong mental health problems. And so he's in and out of mental health facilities, and they're trying to get him regulated on medicine so he can stay at home. But once he turned age 14, the doctors quit communicating with the parents. And they would just call him and say, hey, your son's being released today. They would go pick him up, not know anything about what had been going on with him, not know anything about his prognosis, about what they needed to do to help him. So it's just been a nightmare for them.
Yeah, and it's where this type of thinking comes from, I think, is the pit of hell, is I think where it originates, and then coming through all kinds of weird, wonky Marxist, thoughts on stuff that's been introduced. But historically in our nation, people understood parental rights. It was a very basic concept, right? And the reason that is that, of course, are there bad parents out there? Sure, but overall, the one person who cares about those children more than anybody else is going to do what's best for that child is the parent. And I was moderating a debate in Colbert County for it was like the Republican superintendent. It was this weird thing, but two people who were vying to be the superintendents for Colbert County, and one lady you could just tell was deep into the kind of the educrat stuff, and the other guy was a little bit more conservative, good old boy, And she kept saying social emotional. Every time she's talking, I'm like, my God, lady, I know what that means. Like, you're not doing yourself any favors. And the one question that I think absolutely just destroyed her in the debate, because she did well on a couple other answers, it came up, this exactly what you're talking about, this age of consent and, parental rights and the stuff. And her response to my question pertaining to that was, there are certain instances when a child's right to privacy supersedes the parent's right to know.
Yeah, I disagree with that in all cases.
And I said, could you give me an example? And her eyes got this big. And she knew she was busted. It's like, give me an example. Tell me. And there was like this 2 minutes of silence that felt like 2 hours. And she said, well, we would defer to the mental health professionals to figure out when that is.
Yeah. And the mental health professionals will tell you, because I had to have a consultation with them. So when dealing with this, talking about, lobbyists, I had to work through the medical association and the mental health professionals. And at one point I was on a Zoom call with Dr. Larry Stutz. He carried this in the Senate. Okay. I carried it in the House. Yep. And we actually had mental health professionals tell us that, parents just get in the way. And that's when I knew the conversation was over. Yep. So, look, are there bad parents out there? Yes. They are the minority. Most good parents parents deserve a right to be involved in the mental, physical, dental health of their child. They're raising their child. And so this bill has plenty, our code already had safety nets built in. If a doctor believes the child is being abused, neglected, or exploited, they have a right to treat the child, right, without parental consent. If there's imminent danger to the child, the doctor has a right to proceed. We've already had those in our state code, but they're in this bill over and over and over again to make it clear that there is this safety net.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, parents should be making those decisions. And it took some persuasion. The Medical Association was not immediately for this. They were not. And I will say, look, the Medical Association, MASA, doesn't represent every doctor in the state of Alabama. They don't even represent. Most of the doctors don't
like them. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I know a lot of doctors. None of them are singing the praises of MASA.
Yeah, every time, I talk to the folks out at Shelby Medical in my district, and they were like, no, we're not even members of the Medical Association. Yeah. So ultimately, we were able to come to a good, doable compromise for now. The way it got down to 16 was actually in the Senate. So our bill started at 18. We thought honestly. Common sense. Again, you can't get your ears pierced. You can't get a tattoo. You can't go on a field trip without parental consent. Yeah. You can't vote. There's a list of dozens of things you cannot do as a minor. But yet, making your own medical decisions. So there was an amendment that was put on it in the Senate, and the entire Senate body voted 16 instead of 18. I mean, it was a close vote, but that amendment on the Senate floor is what changed it to 16.
Where was the resistance on that? Where did that come from? Was it Massa only? Was there more? Was it?
Mental health probably was the biggest because they keep using, this is what they say, there's abused kids out there. You wouldn't believe all the abused kids. You wouldn't believe all the bad parents. So they kept pushing that and pushing that and pushing that. And I think some senators just went ahead and voted for 16 because they wanted to get the bill through at something.
Yeah.
So something's better than nothing. And so I think a lot of them that voted for 16 were perfectly fine with 18, but it was just sort of a compromise.
The patterns I'm hoping my listeners are picking up, and every single bill that we've talked about up to this point is like, where's the resistance coming from? Where's the resistance? It's always XYZ association.
Yes.
Right?
They are
the association of XYZ.
You're exactly right. And I had no idea when I got to Montgomery in this role how powerful lobbyists were. I didn't really even understand what they did. And I didn't realize that everybody has a lobbyist. It's amazing to me. Locksmiths have a lobbyist. I mean, everybody has a lobbyist. And now I can see why, because they are so effective and they're just very good at their job. They're very talented. And I'm just being honest about this. They're good at their job. Yeah. And they are very persuasive. And lawmakers, fall for it. Look, I can appreciate lobbyists that are educators because, look, as we talked earlier, we don't have staff. And so we don't know the depths of every single issue that may come before us. So I appreciate a lobbyist that educates me, and then I'm going to take that and I'm going to make my own decision. But you have to be able to have the time and the backbone, honestly, to just do all that. Because if not, you'll just fall for what the lobbyists say. And
they're like salesmen. Like you said, they're persuasive. They're like in a mix between an attorney and a salesman.
Yeah.
And they write a pitch for their legislation.
Yeah.
And the pitch is rarely ever what's actually in the legislation. And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, and this isn't to pick on Ledbetter, but when the gambling push came out, not this session, but the one before, was, there's lots of illegal gambling going on and we have to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is legalize gambling. And it's like, But again, not trying to pick on Ledbetter. That's not my point here. That I just think that's a really good example of how they it's a sales pitch.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, we need this thing for our, whatever.
Look,
this
and that's their job.
That's their job.
They are getting paid to give us this really good sales pitch.
Yeah.
And so we as legislators have to be able to see through all that. And, see the good, see the bad, read the bill ourselves, take those facts and use it as best we can to make the best decisions we can. Yeah. And look, this is business. When you get down there, they're doing a job, we're doing a job for the people, and we have to remember who we work for. We work for the people of the state of Alabama. And I'm not mad at them for making their presentation that I disagree with.
Correct.
Because that's their job.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I can't allow myself to be persuaded when I know that it's fundamentally not the right thing to do for the state.
How do we, so the other pattern, so one was the associations. Every time you talk about resistance, boom, it's the medical association. It's the, whatever, it's some association or some Alabama Department of X. Those are usually the ones that are resisting this stuff that's going on. The other thing that I heard in just about all of these is how do we make it where there's a small portion of the population who are, what's the word they use, that you're derelict parents, who are not capable of exercising authority and discipline in their own lives, who are not self-governing. There's a small portion of the population who cannot self-govern, are bad parents, are bad whatevers. And because these things do create real, horrible, atrocious, situations that are bad for children that are being hurt by that. But it's like the baby with the bathwater thing. It's like, but in order to fix that situation for those few people, you're going to infringe upon the rights of all of these responsible parents.
That's right.
Right. And there needs to be some type of mechanism. And I'm not pretending to have the answer, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's just good, smart legislation. I mean, you have to just use common sense and not let that one little exception rule over everything. You have to realize there's going to be exceptions to everything that we want to do. You're always going to find this one isolated incident that is contrary to what you're trying to do. But you have to stay focused on the greater good, the biggest good that you can do, and then try to provide a safety net for this exception that you know exists. And so, that's what we were trying to do with raising the age of medical consent, is making sure we do have exceptions in place for these cases where there are children that are being neglected. So we need to get that legislation up to 18, and we'll work on that in a year or two. And I'm going to want, parental support. I think once parents realize the good that we've done, at least getting up to 16, parents don't even know that they can fight against that. You take a kid into the hospital and the doctor asks you to leave the room, and they want to ask the 14-year-old if they can give the parent the results of the drug test they've just given them. Of course, the 14-year-old's going to say, I don't want my mom to know, I might get in trouble. Yeah. That's a kid, right? So therefore, the doctor can't give the results to the parent. I mean, I heard from parents who really think that they lost their children because they were not adequately informed by doctors, and they weren't able to step in and help their kids that later became addicts and then lost their lives.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, people are like, well, the slippery slope fallacy. No, slippery slopes are real, and we're seeing that. I always say, I joke that we're going to put on our website a section that says, when that which will never happen here happens here again, because everyone says that'll never happen in Alabama. That'll never happen here in Alabama. Well, let me tell you something that just happened in Colorado, where I moved here from 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Colorado, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, was a reliably deep red state. It was made up of military. So you're talking Fort Carson, NORAD, Peterson Air Force Base, the Air Force Academy, Lowry Air Force Base. There was all these military bases. There's a big oil and gas industry there. And then it was like focused on the family and big churches and ministries. Extremely right-wing state, Colorado used to be. Okay, last week, they passed a bill that allowed, basically, if you misgender your children, they can take your children from you. If you refuse to allow them to transition their gender, they can take your children from you.
That is sad. California, Colorado passed that.
20 years ago, reliably red state, extremely conservative, hardcore Republican state. 20 years later, taking people's kids, have an openly homosexual governor who just signed a bill that will take your kids if you misgender them. That in 20 years. And so when people are like, that can't happen here, this is Alabama, it's like, stop it.
Yeah.
It can. Our podcast started out with, what is a woman, right, in Alabama. And so it's like, we have to be vigilant on this stuff. And it's just, it's.
I mean, you're right. I mean, and people think, well, I'm going to send my kid to school at the University of Alabama because Alabama's such a red state. Yeah. Well, wait a minute. University of Alabama is not a conservative school. Over 60% of the students are from out of state. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a conservative school. The professors, the instructors are not conservative instructors. You'll find a handful that are, and they probably feel like they can't even speak out.
Yeah.
So yes, we have to be constantly vigilant.
The attorney that revived critical theory was at the University of Alabama as an attorney. It's like Richard Delgado.
And his wife. Yeah. And his wife. They both worked there.
Yeah.
In the law school.
It's unbelievable.
And they wrote CRT books. I've read both of them. Yeah. And yes, right there
in the University of Alabama.
At the University of Alabama.
I'm hoping Trump got it all out of there when he spoke. I'm hoping like it was like something where he went and spoke and all the liberal elitists just left. Okay, this is wishful thinking on my part. I'm aware of that, but I'm just hoping.
Well, I loved it. I loved Trump being there, and I tell you what, he's given all of us the wind beneath our wings that we need to push forward. Yeah. And I'm very thankful to him, and I hope really one of the next areas I want to work on is higher education and accreditation in higher education, because I think that's where some of the problems are coming in, because these universities want to be accredited in all the different colleges. There's just dozens and dozens of different ones, and a lot of them are pushing this DEI, this woke DEI philosophy, even though it's against our state law. And so I've got I've got, I want to work on that. That's one of the things I have in my back pocket.
We've written about some of that lately, but I digress.
Well, and we've got some good executive orders from President Trump involving that issue.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure it's all being implemented?
Yeah, because they
fact-checking it?
They change from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Now it's like the Office of Multiculturalism, but it's the same people doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. But they just renamed it so that it fits within the executive order.
And I think, in a lot of cases, and I think from some of the people I've talked to at the University of Alabama, they have a sincere intent, but that indoctrination is embedded so deeply that it's going to take years. I know students that have given up their scholarships because they were in that fellowship program, the Robert Witt fellowship program, because the indoctrination they felt like they were in an indoctrination camp every day. And it's an extremely prestigious honor to be selected a fellow in that fellowship program. And I know at least two, that dropped out mid-year because it was awful.
I want them on the podcast.
Hey, they may do it. I'll work on that. I'll work on that. I have asked them, if you want to make a difference, speak up.
Yeah.
Because as President Trump said, you're young, but you can still make a difference.
Yeah.
Stand up for what's right.
Well, and we're in an environment now where everything is shifting. Yes, that stuff is entrenched in there, just like I was talking about Montgomery. For some reason, liberals always find themselves into these bureaucratic positions. Same thing at universities. Like wherever the administrative decisions are made, and it's like this faceless blob of like forcing DEI on you. Like, who are these people? It's entrenched. However, right now you can tell by the stuff that like Tucker Carlson is saying and Matt Walsh is saying, and you can they're saying stuff that you couldn't say 2 years ago.
Yes.
Like you would be canceled, and it's part of their daily routine now. The tides are turning. People are speaking out. People are sick of it.
Yes.
And so now is the time for everyone to speak their mind. And I'd love to have them on.
I hope these students will do that. Actually, since they've dropped out of the class, they have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Before, they're worried about their grades.
Yeah.
This one female even changed her major to get away from this professor because she did not want to have to be in her class. Changed her major, gave up a prestigious college scholarship and a prestigious position as a fellow in order to get away from this indoctrination.
Yeah, we've covered. There was a medical student who left for the same reason, and then there was a teacher that they ran out, a professor that they ran out. I forget. He did come on my podcast and talked about it. Where he was
I remember that.
and so
Yep.
Well, this is good stuff. Is there any parting thoughts for my audience?
Well, let me just say that in spite of all these difficulties that we've talked about, I thoroughly enjoy working down there. I think we are doing some good. I genuinely like the people that I work with, and I think all of us are trying to do the best that we can for our constituents.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that really surprised me is how much I was going to really enjoy working with these people and how much I really like my fellow legislators.
Yeah.
And none of us are perfect. And I'm sure I'm going to make a decision somewhere along the line that will disappoint you, Brian, or disappoint somebody, because we're just not perfect people.
Sure.
And we just do the best we can with the information we have at hand. Yeah. But on both sides of the aisle, there are people of faith. And I think people are surprised when they learn how often we pray. We can't do it in our schools, but in the state government, we start every day with prayer, every committee meeting with prayer. We huddle up in the halls and pray.
That's amazing.
So as much as we do it in school, as much as it says, as much as we do it, at the State House, it says, "In God we trust," above Speaker Ledbetter's chair. He had that installed. Yet we're having trouble getting the 10 Commandments put on the wall in our public schools. So I want to take the amount of praying and the amount of freedom of religion that we have in our state government areas and bring our school children have it? Yeah. Is that too much to ask?
Amen. Love it. Well, I'm going to enjoy watching you do that. So good stuff. Well,
working on it.
By the time this publishes, I think Sine Die will have happened. I'm not 100% sure. Is it Wednesday?
Wednesday will Sine Die. So
it'll be right around Sine Die when this publishes, depending on a couple things. So, but Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to come down.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
I always enjoy doing this. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much. All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. As always, until next time, I forgot my thing. I do it every week.
Do it over again.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let me make sure I think about it. All right. I always say, as always, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry. That's my line. So as always, Until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.